And if Kathy's in, we've got some volunteers that'll do those things. If not, call my phone, 765-505-2109. During the day, if it's at night, 344-7707, and we will take care of those needs. If your power goes out, if you got medicine that you need or something from the grocery store or whatever it happens to be. And those, the thing about it is that's what a church is about. And I don't want to take credit for either one of those. One of them, the opening the church if power goes out when it's extremely cold, actually was something that Gene Birch brought up last winter or winter before last when we had an extreme thing. And then the whole point about running around, that was Rob Belcher. So, that's what church is supposed to be about. We are here to take care of each other, to watch out for each other, and to do those things. And just to make sure that, we take care of one another, not just spiritually, by praying for one another, being in church together, having fellowship, and all those things. But we also take care of the needs. Jesus did both. He healed people, he fed them, and he helped them spiritually, and of course, and so we try to do all those things. So with that, let's pray. Father, we just thank you for this time to be together on this evening, for your word that we can have, Lord, that we can study, that we can carry, that we can live by, Lord. And we just ask that you help us this evening to understand your word, to see the truths that are in it, what it means to us today, and what it's going to mean for those in the future. And Lord, just give us wisdom and discernment and the ability to absorb it. We do pray for all these folks that we have mentioned tonight, Lord, those that are undergoing things, those that are trying to recuperate, Lord, those that are just waiting, and just all the rest. And we just thank you for all these things. And we pray for the soldiers and their families, all of our first responders, and all those people that are taking care of us and keeping us safe. And we thank you for this technology that lets us join together in this way that we couldn't have done just a little bit ago. And all this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. And because of the cold, just like last week, you probably noticed that we're not at the church, and we're gathered. And I'm sitting at one end of the kitchen table, and Gail's at the other end of the kitchen table. And so we'll get started on our Bible study now. We got into the first verse or two last week of chapter 17, but I'm going to start reading with 17. And I'm going to read quite a bit because we kind of to need to hear it all at once, and then we'll come back and kind of go through it like we do, a verse or two at a time. One of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a desert, and there I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. Excuse me. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. This title was written on her forehead: Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast in which you saw once was, now is not, and will come up out of the abyss to go to his destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because he once was, now is not, and yet will come. This calls for a mind of wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen. One is, the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain a little while. The beast who once was and now is not is an 8th king, and he belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and with them will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. Then the angel said to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitude, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin, leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to accomplish this purpose by agreeing to give the beast their power to rule until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. All right, so that's the whole chapter of chapter 17. And chapter 17 is about the woman and the beast on which she rides and the interaction between them. And there's a couple of ways to look at all this, 17 and 18. Some see that as all one city together, that's one Babylon. Some see it as two, that there are two Babylons mentioned here, two cities. One is what we would call the ecclesiastical Babylon, or which is the religious center. The other one is the economic or the social, and not social like partying and getting together, although that's part of it, but civil, that's a better word, the civil Babylon, the one in which the government is there that rules the world. So here we start in right before verse 2, the great prostitute who sits on the mighty waters. The last time we went to verse 15, if you want to know what the mighty waters are, then jump to verse 15. Said the angel saw me and said, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitude, nations, and languages. So the whole idea of this is that this Babylon, this prostitute, is sitting on a place that controls everything. It's all about all nations, all languages, all ethnic groups, everything. Kind of like the first view that John had of heaven when in the beginning, back in chapter 4, I think, that when he saw all nations, languages, people, ethnic groups, and all those things gathered around the throne. So, but also with her are the kings of the earth that committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adultery. So we kind of talked about that last week, that she's the prostitute, but the kings are committing adultery, which means they should be faithful to somebody, and they're leaving that faithfulness to come to her, that she is a second. When you're committing adultery, there's a difference between adultery and fornication in the Bible. Adultery is when you are committed, you're married or whatever, and you have sex with someone in which you are not married to, and therefore violate your covenant with that person or your agreement or whatever. Where fornication is just sex with people that are not married. Neither one of them are married, and so one is having an affair within marriage, the other one's having an affair outside of marriage. So and that's the difference here. And so when it talks about these kings and they're committing adultery, it means that they have a commitment to somebody or to something which is generally understood to be their people. Every ruler has a commitment to their people. And that's one of the things that the Old Testament, when it talks about the kings and the rulers and all that, whether it was somebody from David's line, if it was someone, all the prophets, if it was Moses, it doesn't matter who it was. Your first commitment is to God. Your second commitment is to your people. You come third. But that's usually where adultery comes in, is that you forsake what is right and who you have obligations to, and you seek the pleasure or whatever you can get out of it. And so that's the idea, and that the inhabitants of the earth are so fascinated by this woman, this city, or whatever it is that they are so fascinated that they are following her with fanaticism, and if you think that that's unrealistic or unhuman, just think. Just look at the last couple of elections that we've had in our country. fanaticism that is there. That people are acting as if they're intoxicated with something. So, that's just small groups here, there, and yonder. And you see it scattered around the world in different pockets with different groups of people in different kinds of ways. This is going to be a worldwide thing in which that kind of fanaticism is going to be all over the globe from one end all the way to the other. And so then, verse 3, the angel carried me away in the spirit into a desert. Now, one of the things, John's already in the Spirit. He's already says he's in the Spirit. One of the questions that comes up, was he not in the Spirit anymore? Is he in a different way in the Spirit? It's just a reminder, I think, that that he's in the Spirit, to remember that, the status that he's in. And when you're in the Spirit, you can be transported from one spot to another really easy, where if you are in the body, it makes that a little bit harder. But they go into a desert. Now, one of the things that is, there's kind of three things about going into the desert. Number one, in the desert was a place in which a lot of prophets got their call, or is a place where a lot of the faith was started. Moses got his call out in the desert. Elijah got his call in the desert. And by the way, desert in the Bible goes along with the whole idea of deserted and wilderness. So, when we think of desert, we either think of the Southwest and the cactus and all those things, or we think of the Sahara and nothing but sand. But it can be basically just a deserted place. That's where the two words are actually tied to one another. And so he's going out there. Now, that was one of the things. The other thing about it too is that, it's out in a place that's lonely, nobody's around, all that. So it's, it could be some place that somebody's getting called from, like we see in some of the Bible. It could just be that desolate place that she's at and doing these things kind of behind the scenes. Or one of the other views too is outside of both Rome and Babylon. In the days of John, it was deserted around those towns, and especially Babylon. Babylon was a desert like we think of with the desert, hot, dry, sandy, dusty, that sort of thing. Rome, it was just kind of a deserted area around that, but it kind of fits with all of those. But whatever reason it is, he goes into a desert. And it could be the two that in a desert, if there's nothing there, it makes the vision that you have stand out more, because there's nothing else to contrast it. There's nothing else to compare it to. There's nothing to detract from that vision. So, it could also be taken as a way that John was taken out in a place where he could focus on what he was to see, and there would be no distractions to that. So let's look at what he saw. He said, there I saw, and that's the other thing about it too. He sees it. And we need to remember that as we read all these times through here, when John says, I saw, I heard, I witnessed, all those things, to know that it was something that he saw that he wrote down. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names, and had 7 heads and 10 horns. So, the beast. What is the beast, or who is the beast? Let's talk about the beast first before we talk about the woman. This is the beast of the sea. Because if you go back to chapter 13, it says 13:1, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. He had 10 horns, 7 heads, with 10 crowns on his horns, and each head had a blasphemous name. So that's pretty well the same beast. Now, the only difference between the two is the color and the different shapes. John's already described what the beast looked like. So he didn't go into a lot of details, about the leopard and all the other 3 things that were on it that it resembled. But here it is with blasphemous names and scarlet beast. Now, scarlet, that's one of the things that that people look at, and it's also one of those things that became part of some of the assumptions of the devil too. When you used to see a picture of the devil, and he was like a demon, and he had the big long tail, sometimes with a big point on the back, or horns, and all those things. What color was he usually? Red. Right, and that's kind of where this is kind of where that comes from, and so here he is, and it doesn't say that this is the beast, and so anyway, with blasphemous names, 10 horns, or 7 heads, 10 horns. Now, that beast out of the sea, when we went back and we looked at that and we talked about some different things about the beast, but some of those blasphemous names and the whole idea of the blasphemous names kind of goes back even to the Roman emperors and all of that wanted to be worshipped as gods, and to take the place of God. And that was one of those things that started with Tiberius, or also known as Caesar Augustus, the one that sent out the decree to get Mary and Joseph down to Bethlehem for Jesus to be born. They wanted to be referred to as the greatest and as a king, and oftentimes they were addressed as the divine. He insisted that he be addressed as the divine Augustus, which Augustus means the greatest. So and it didn't get any better as it went. And anytime you have that, now some think that it's also a reference to all of the false gods, the false temples, all those things that were around, and so and it says over in 12 that the 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received the kingdom, but we'll get one for an hour. So we're going to handle the horns and the heads and all that when we get on farther down in there. But the one of the things to kind of see here and to kind of remember is that this whole idea of the woman on the beast, she's sitting on the beast. You only sit on a beast that is serving you. You try to get on a horse that's not been broken, and you're not going to stay on it. If you're going to sit on a horse, it's one that is serving you and all that. So it starts off with she's sitting on this beast and resting on it and it is what is supporting her. And carrying her. So, in other words, she's not even there of her own strength or power. She's resting on something else that is supporting her and carrying her, and that is the beast underneath her. So, she is dressed in purple and scarlet. Now, with the purple and the scarlet, one of or a couple of things about that, Roman officials were always dressed not in scarlet, in purple. And even the senators of Rome, who were the next group right underneath the emperor was pretty well always dressed in purple. But all the senators, the way that people knew that they were a senator is that they had at least one purple stripe through their robes that they wore, so that people could see. If you had a purple stripe, that meant that you were a senator, a part of the government, a part of the ruling. So that's thought to be part of it. The color of purple was the color of the ruling class of Rome. Now, some also take that whole idea of the scarlet or of the red, and they associate that with the Catholic Church. Now, I'm not telling you that's what it is. We're talking about different views and things. But they see that because, you have the cardinals, you have all the rest, that scarlet red has always been a part of the church. And some see this whole thing as a way to regain the control when we're talking about that, the ecclesiastical or the religious Babylon or Rome, that it is trying to not just regain the old Roman Empire from a civil standpoint, but the Roman faith, because the actual official name of the Catholic Church is the Roman Catholic Church. It is the universal church, which Catholic means universal. It is the universal church based out of Rome. It is with its headquarters in Rome, or however you want to translate that all. And so part of it, see this as the trying to, by this time the church itself has been built up or I mean, not built up. The church itself has been taken up to be with Christ, and so it's just an apostate church or a false church that is left behind, and that people see will operate in the form of a real church, trying to recruit people and all that. But the true believers have been taken up. Now there are some who will be still be true believers. They're not going to be a part of this, because we've already talked about they're being persecuted. These are probably people that have the mark of the beast on them, and all that, and continuing to work, because the beast and the woman are in it together. And it says down in verse 18, and that's the very last verse of the chapter, the woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. So part of that idea, coming back to the old Roman Empire that ruled what was known as, they called the civilized world. Now, Lloyd Zuber told me one time, said we probably ought to say the civilized Western world, because there were civilizations in the East that were just about as advanced as in the West, but and so that's what they're talking about. Mostly Europe, what we call the Middle East, North Africa, all the way over, and Europe all the way over to Britain, up into Germany, and that sort of thing. So she's dressed in the purple and the scarlet, and was glittering with gold and precious stones and pearls. So this woman, who is the great city, the Babylon, she is one that rules, and it's all about look at me is the whole idea. It's not about that service to the people. It's about look at me, look at how glorious I am with my scarlet and my purple, which is the religious, the civil. Look at the gold and the gems and all of those things that she's got on, that represents splendor and opulence and all of those things. And she had a golden cup. Now, the only people that drank out of golden cups were royalty and or people that are very, very wealthy. And even today, some people do that to demonstrate their wealth. But she's got a golden cup. Now, golden cups were also used in religious worship, and that goes all the way back, to the temple and all of those things that we read about. That they made golden cups to do their drink offerings and all of that. And we talked. I don't remember if it was last week or week before last, but one of the things that we talked about was, that what brought about the original Babylon's demise, and what actually brought it all to a head, was that the king had his servants go to the royal treasury, get out the golden cups, golden goblets from the Jerusalem temple to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and brought them out, filled them full of wine at his party, and used those to toast the gods of Babylon. And that's when, that old thing about the writing on the wall, that's when the hand came out and started writing in the wall and said his days were numbered, his time was over, he was being weighed out in a balance, and he didn't make the cut. And all of those. So even there we read about the golden goblets that were used. But here, her golden cup is in her hand and filled with the abominable things and the filth of her adultery. So it kind of goes back up to verse 2, that the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. She is also. In her hand, she has got those abominable things, and that usually means blasphemous, heretical, anti-God, all those kind of things. Everything for your own pleasure, or for her own pleasure, for her own benefit, for her own gain. And she's using people. She's got all the crowds coming around her and supporting her. They're all in that cup, and she's drinking it. Now, then we get to verse 5. And verse 5 can be taken a couple of different ways. This title was written on her forehead: Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abomination of the earth. Now, a couple of things about it. Now, you have to remember that in the Greek as well as in the Hebrew, they did not have, they didn't use what we call, I think they're called conjunctions, ands, these, and those kind of things that tie, but those things that tie sentences together. And so sometimes, and they didn't use, and because space was limited, they didn't use commas, exclamation points, question marks. They didn't use punctuation. What they did was they wrote it, and they thought that by their sentence structure, people would be able to figure it out. Well, this is one of those things in which we wonder about, and there's 2 or 3 different ways of translating this. Now, in the NIV, it has it all as one: mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes, and of the abomination of the earth. Some separate mystery out with the first part, that the title was written on her head, that is a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes. So this mystery, it can be either on her, which it is mysterious to us, but in the Bible, it uses the word mystery and mysterious quite a bit. And usually the way that it is used, or every time, except for this one, or probably including this one, is that it is not what we think about as something to be discovered, but is a mystery of God, or the mystery of our faith. We say that when we do communion. It means it is something that was hidden in heaven for a while and then revealed to people. And the mystery of our faith is that, and I mean, that part is something that we're not going to understand, that Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. And we proclaim that. It means we don't have to understand it, that's what it is. And so this can be either taken as, all right, here's a mystery, this has been kind of kept in heaven, we're going to reveal it to you now, or that this is still a mystery, that she is a mystery to us. And that's why you have it, and you may have it in either way, because it's one of those things that's kind of up to the translator on the way that translator or translators think that it needs to be done. So, but the whole idea is Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. And so what that means is she's not only a prostitute, but that she has others out there. It doesn't just say the mother of a prostitute, it says prostitutes. So it kind of goes back to that idea of the kings of the earth and those that have prostituted themselves for her or with her, that all these people are following her, and that everybody's in it for what they can get out of it, or for what they can gain from it. And that's what the whole idea of prostitution here. Now, the other part of that is that in the Old Testament, and now in the New Testament, one of the contrasts we have is our relationship to God, and where does it fall? And in the Old Testament, God a lot of times called the faithful people his bride or his wife, and usually he was referring to the whole nation of Israel. And at times he would say that, I brought you up as the virgin Israel and did all these things, and then you prostituted yourself after this nation, after that nation, after this God and that God. Rather than saying true to me, you sold yourself to others for what you could get out of it. And that's what that's all about. But that it is through Babylon, it's through this false church, it is through these false believers that everybody's being led astray, and that they're being sold for what they can get out of it. It's not about worshiping the true God. And even in the New Testament, the church is called the bride of Christ. Jesus uses that term. Paul uses that term. There's other times it is used. And so, this is not the bride of Christ, the true church. This is the prostitute, the unfaithful ones, which is the big difference. This is not the faithful church. This is the faithful church. And one of the things to think about. So, you have all these people that are worshiping as Christians and in churches or as a church, and all of that together. And then the rapture comes, and all of the true believers are taken away. And within that, there are going to be a lot of churches. There's one of the things that a lot of people say, and we've mentioned it a few times, that the Sunday after the rapture, all the churches will be full. Now, there's going to be two kinds of people in those churches. There's going to be those that are saying, oh man, I missed it. And they realize that all this stuff was true, and they're coming in to try to be the faithful people. That's only going to be part of it. But you know why those churches are still there? Because they weren't true churches. And because they're not true churches, they weren't either they weren't teaching the right things. They were guiding people in the wrong directions. They were false church. If they had been a part of the true church, then what would have happened? They'd have left with everybody else. So in the churches, what you have left are those that weren't teaching the things that they needed to be teaching in the beginning. They're either false teachers, they're blasphemous teachers, they're heretical, which means that they're teaching in opposition to the Bible, and it may not even be that they are, that they're way off. They don't have to be way off. They're just off. They're off enough that people didn't that they're there. And one of the things to think about is if all these people are going to churches and listening to ministers that didn't make the rapture, is that really somebody you want to listen to, or that they should be listening to? And that's the point here of this being the prostitute, that these people are still teaching for the wrong reasons in the wrong ways, and they're not going to get the people to heaven. Those are the martyrs and things that we're going to talk about. And we're even going to, and so here we have this Babylon the Great, who is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth, as verse 18 says. And this is the one that's over the mighty waters, the whole earth, and all of those things. But it's a false faith. It is not the real faith. And the thing to understand is that her foundation is the beast. This is a false church being supported by the beast and for the sake of the beast, and that they are in it together. And is why she's sitting on this beast. And that she's not just the mother of prostitutes, but all the abominations of the earth, all the false teachings, all the things. And when we go back to the Old Testament, and when we look at things in the Old Testament, the New Testament, all the things that are called abominations, that's all the things that are false teachings, that are false worship. The biggest abomination in the Old Testament is human sacrifice. People sacrificing their children to Moloch and the different gods there. But the whole point of it is that abominations are things that not is just against God's will, but is appalling to God. So this woman, this Babylon, this universal false church is doing things that are appalling to God, and being supported by the beast. Now, it's going to look like a real church. It's probably going to be people meeting in real churches, but it is not a real church, because then we get to verse 6. And I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. So, here the whole idea is this supposed church is persecuting the saints. Now, this is another one of those places that, because there's no commas or anything like that, and that this is translated in two different ways. One of them is, I saw the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of those who bore the testimony to Jesus. So, and it kind of makes a difference whether it's the blood of the saints, comma, and to further describe them, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. Kind of like, well, okay, it's the saints, which are the ones that bore testimony to Jesus. Or it can say the saints and those who bore testimony. And those that see that, or see it that way, say that it's the Old Testament saints, the two New Testament martyrs, and it's the both, that this false church, that these false believers, this Babylon, that it goes back to, those of Babylon, of the original Babylon, and what it did to the believers in the beginning. It was Babylon that threw Hadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fire, because they would not bow down and worship the king as a god. And there were other examples we could go into, and all that sort of thing too. So some say, this is about the Old Testament Babylon tied to the New Testament and the Revelation Babylon. Those that are, that group that claims to be God, that are blaspheming, that are setting themselves up in the place of God. They want to be worshipped, which is a church for all those that are worshiping them. And that is the Old Testament saints from that, and the New Testament martyrs. Others see this as just a New Testament thing, as something in the future, and then during that time of tribulation, to which it is just the saints who, and then the last part is a description of those saints, those that have had their blood spilled because of their faith in Jesus Christ. I kind of lean more towards the second one. That is probably a description of who the saints are, because that term's not really used in the Old Testament as such as it is in the New Testament. And in the New Testament, it refers to all believers in Christ. Paul uses it a lot. He never uses it as a person here or a person there. It's always the group. He writes a letter to the saints that are in whatever city he's writing to, and that is all the believers. So that's kind of where I see it. So, and that she is drunk with their blood. The persecutions that are there. And so even in this, and which kind of fits with the whole 7 years of tribulation anyway, because we've talked about the things that are going to happen with these folks and during this period of time, and with those few believers and those folks that do become true believers after the rapture, and there are going to be some of those, as well as the 144,000 and all of that. So, continuing on then with verse 6, when I saw her, I was greatly astonished. To me, that's one of those understatements of the Bible. I mean, I'm sitting there thinking, man, I'd reckon he was astonished. I think any of us would be astonished to see that. And to me, it's one of those things, where I'm always saying, people are people. You got to understand, the folks in the Bible were people, just like we're people today. They have the same kind of reactions and ideas and all that. And to me, this is a backup of that. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Well, no kidding. Then verse 7. Then the angel said to me, why are you astonished? I'll explain to you the mystery of the woman and the beast she rides, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and will come up out of the abyss and to go to his destruction. Now you notice, it's one of the things we always talk about God, the one who was and is to come. And even Jesus, when he had the disciples and he was telling them, don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God, trust also in me. And he didn't say, here it says the one who was, the one who was not, and the one who will be. Jesus never, even when he was going to the tomb, he didn't say, I will not be during that time. What he said was, you will see me, there will be a time you will not see me, and then you will see me again. He didn't say he was going to cease to exist, or wasn't going to be around, or wasn't going to be in power. It was about what we saw and how we experienced him, which is different than the one who which you once was, now is not, and will come up out of the abyss to go to his destruction. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next chapter. But that is the beast, and that is the beast of the land, and or the beasts of the sea, and all of that together that we talked a little bit back there. Again, the angel makes sure that he mentions that this beast has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. And like I said, we'll get to that in verse 12. The abyss, this is something that I think this is the first time it's been mentioned in Revelation, but it's not the first time it was mentioned. When Jesus had a couple of his interactions with some of the demons, one of the things that they asked him one time, are you here to send us into the abyss? And the abyss is another name for what some people refer to as hell. It is that place which will be the permanent home of the devil. Now, from a biblical standpoint, everybody thinks that Satan is in hell and comes from hell, but he is not. He is on the earth. That hell or the abyss or whatever is something that comes up later, and we're going to get to that about the bottomless pit, that it's locked, and all that sort of stuff. He's going to be in there. He's going to be cast in there for a while, and then he's going to be released to come back again. So the angel is telling John and us this up front. It's going to get explained later on, and we'll talk about the abyss and all of that and the destruction as those things occur towards the end, rather than getting tied down with them now. So it goes on to say, the inhabitants of the earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world will be astonished when they see the beast, because he once was, and now is not, and yet will come. So that whole idea that he comes back up out of the abyss after being locked up there for 1,000 years and all that is going to astonish everybody upon the earth, because they're going to think he was gone. But like I said, we'll get to that more when that part comes up. Now, this is another one of those places in which punctuation would have made a big difference. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world. Now, you can read that all together just like that. Whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world. Or you can read it as those whose names have not been written in the book of life that came at the creation of the world will be astonished. Now, the way that the difference in those two is where the whole idea of free will or predestination comes from. Now, those of us that believe in free will see the book of life was there from the creation of the world. From Adam and Eve on, and your name needs to be written in the book of life. That's the whole point, is that we accept Christ, so our name is written in the book of life, and that doesn't have anything to do with any kind of book here on earth, any kind of membership role in any church of any denomination of any kind. It is something that is in heaven that only God possesses and puts down, in that the names of those that accept Christ as their Savior, then your name gets written down, and the book has been from the beginning. And so we try to have our name written in the book. Now, the other way you can take it is that, and that's where the punctuation comes in, if you see that as whose names are written in the book of life from the beginning of the world, then that means your name is already in it before the world was created, or as the world was being created. And so that's predestination. That's where people that believe in predestination kind of punctuated in that way, because then what that means is that God, before he created people, as he was creating the earth, he already determined whose names were going to be in the book of life and whose names were not. That it is not your choice on whether you will be saved or not. God has already determined whether you're going to be saved. What is your choice is, at what point in your life will you be saved? Will you accept Christ at 18, or are you going to wait till you're 80? But it doesn't matter whether you do it at 18 or 80. You're going to do it before you die, because God has said you will do it. And so it's up to you to make that determination. And the view of evangelism within the people that believe that way is to get you to where they say, well, if you do it at 18, you have a whole lot better life between now and 80. But, if there's two things that kind of bother me about that. The first one is, then You can say, well, if I'm going to get there, I'm going to get there. So why accept Christ now? If I'm going to do it at some point before I die, there's all kinds of time to live outside of Christ or away from Christ till that time. And so I don't have to worry about that time, because even if I live like I want to live and I live a life away from Christ, before I die, I am going to be saved. That's beyond my control, so I don't have to worry about it. Now, the other way of thinking about that too, or along with that, is that, okay, well, if I'm not going to be saved, and if God's already determined, what's the point? I might as well do whatever the heck I want to do. And so, it kind of puts those things in there. But the part that bothers me the most about all that is that if God decided and wrote everybody's names that it's going to be saved down in the book of life before he created them, that means God created people just to send them to hell for an eternity. And to me, that just doesn't jive with the other things that we read about God. Plus, Jesus said, for God so loved the world, that's all inclusive. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Whosoever means whoever makes that choice. And then you go into John 3:17, and God does not wish that the world should be condemned, but the whole world should be saved. So if God wishes that no one should be condemned, why would he put people down to be condemned? To me, it doesn't make sense. Free will, to me, makes sense. But you can, depending on how you understand that concept of free will versus predestination, determines how you translate the dictation in that sentence. So we're going to say that it's the book of life that's been there, and the people whose names aren't written there. In other words, those who are not following Christ. That's the point that this is making. Those who are not following Christ, those who at this time have accepted Christ and have not had the mark, they're not following the beast, they're not giving in to the abominations and the heresy and the blasphemies and all of that. They're not fooled, is the point here, because it's the ones whose names are not there that are astonished when they see the beast, who once was, now is not, and yet will come. So, it's the ones whose names are written down. That's the ones, the people that have accepted Christ, that are trying to live according to Christ. They're the ones that are going to be persecuted. That's the ones those saints that we were talking about back in verse 6, that she is persecuting, and and has their blood in her cup, and all of that. So, I like verse 9. I'm not. I kind of hope that I'm included in that, but it says, "This calls for a mind with wisdom." So, some of you may qualify, some of us may not. I don't know, but this calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. And we'll get into the 7 kings the next time. But we're talking about Babylon. And we're talking about the one that rules over the waters. We're talking about the false church and where it's based. We talked about the scarlet and what some people see that as, and all of that. Well, there is a town, a historical town that's called the town of 7 cities. It is something those are not Christian terms that refer to it as the town of 7 hills. That is a term that is used historically, and I'm talking for over 2,000 years, about 2,500, if not 3,000 years, that refer to a city as the city of the 7 hills. Guess where that city is? It's called Rome. And that's how Rome started, was little villages on 7 different hills that kind of come together on the west side of the Tigris River to form what would become Rome all along. So, when the angel tells John, the 7 heads or 7 hills on which the woman sits, that's Rome. She is being supported by Rome. Now, this part, and this is the Babylon, that's kind of getting more into that civil Babylon that we talked about, the civil government, and that's what this beast of the sea is what's supporting that woman in the church, and that support is coming out of Rome and that seven hills. And I've got about 3 minutes till, but I think we're going to stop it here on verse 10, because there's no way we can talk about the seven kings, or the seven kings, the five, the one, and the eighth, and all of that in 3 minutes. And even if we talk about some of it, we'll have to come back and talk about it again next week in order to keep it all tied together. And next week we may be doing it this way again, because the last I saw of the forecast for next Sunday, it's supposed to be worse than today. But either way, if you just watch for us, we'll be on somewhere. We'll be on from the chapel, or we'll be on from home. But I'm glad you all came with us, because I know the game started about a half hour ago. And so there's probably a lot of you that maybe taped that, or you're going to watch this. You're watching this later on sometime other than Sunday night. So next time we will start up with verse 10. So I hope you all have a blessed week, blessed evening. Enjoy the game. I couldn't care less who wins. I just want to see the commercials. I really don't care about the halftime show. I just want to see the commercials. So if they had a way just to watch all the commercials and not watch the game, I'd probably do that. But anyway, stay warm, stay in love with God, and be blessed. And see you next week.